Hello ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Uncle Matt's Cookery Lessons. Going to be making a quiche today, a vegetarian one with spinach and broccoli and some cheese, and it's going to be yummy like that. Hello, I'm going to make a quiche, a spinach, broccoli and mixed cheese quiche. Perfect for a lunchtime dish. It's just lovely. Quiche, beautiful. Alright there, so it says on the screen there, yeah, my full recipe will now be on my website and I'll put a link to that in the description. Sifting the plain flour first. It's always good to sift the flour. And that flour, by the way, is chilled, and the bowl I got it in has been chilled, and this butter was chilled, although it looks a bit softer now because it's been out for a little while I take in photos and things. But what I'm going to do is dice it up into little cubes like that. I'm going to mix that in with the flour to sort of separate all the bits of butter from themselves, and rather than making this pastry immediately, that is going to go back in the fridge to get as cold, get cold basically, because making pastry when everything's cold is a lot better. So while that's chilling down, I'm going to make the custard part of this. So obviously quiche has three components. It's got the pastry, it's got the custard, and then whatever fillings you decide to put into it. So this one is a cheesy one, but the custard pretty much stays the same. I use for this recipe, I've got 4 eggs. Well, you'll see the recipe in my website. It's a brilliant website. And I'm using pretty much like a 50-50 almost, or a little bit more milk than cream, but pretty much 50-50 milk and cream. I find that's a nice balance. It's not too rich, but it's nice and indulgent at the same time. And some nutmeg. Nutmeg, of course, is lovely with quiche. Give it a season, salt and pepper. You have to sort of guess the seasoning really, unless you're happy tasting raw egg, which I am, but not everyone is. Right, so that's made. Buttering the tart case or flan case that I'm going to do. This is a removable bottom one, so I've had that in the fridge as well. Melted some butter, brushed it on there so it sets quickly, but that is going back in the fridge as well. Lots of things going in and out of the fridge today. So that's had a chance to chill nicely. If you have a food processor, I don't at the moment, by all means use that. It's probably a lot more efficient than using your hands, but I use the crumbing technique, try to use as much of my fingertips as possible, and then later on, get it to like a sort of nice breadcrumby consistency, like so. Make a little well for the egg to go into. I think you need egg in pastry, otherwise it's a bit too much like a biscuit. And I use a knife, like one from the cutlery drawer, one you'd have your dinner with, to start that off. And then, in with my hands again. I want to bring this together to a dough, so now we're going to need some nice cold water to bring this together, and that's basically all I'm looking to do with this pastry, is add enough water. So there's maybe a tablespoon or a couple of tablespoonfuls gone in there. Is that going to bring this together? Is that enough? No, it isn't. It's not enough, Uncle Matt, so you're going to need a little bit more. He's going to realise any minute now. Yeah, there you go. And that should be enough to bring this thing together. Now if you've don't put enough in, it will still work. You'll find your pastry will be difficult to roll. It'll be really crumbly and breaking up. And if you put too much, you'll just find that your pastry is a bit wet and a bit sticky. So you'll just have to use more flour when you're rolling it out. But it is quite forgiving. If you've got a little bit too much water, it's better than not enough. So now that wants a nice chill down and a rest. So cling film it, and I like to sort of flatten it out a bit so that there's less rolling to do later. Right, yeah, so in the fridge with that. Now how are we doing? Who's keeping score? We've got the pastry made, that's resting in the fridge. We've got the custard made. So it's the other component now. It is the filling. And in this case, I'm using a bit of onion. I said this is a broccoli and spinach quiche, but I think a little bit of onion is nice. I like to sneak a little bit of that stuff in pretty much everything I cook, apart from desserts, really. Anyway, there's the broccoli. So that's the size of the spear I'm going for. Yeah, that's about right. So let's quickly race through that. Get all those nice and even. So they'll cook evenly, won't they? That's good. Yes, very nice. Let's pop that to the side. And the spinach I've got in a bowl of water, just so it's nice and washed. It said it's already washed and ready to go, but I never trust that, so I've got mine just soaking in some cold water so it gets any bits of grit out of it. Alright, rolling the pastry. You see this technique? So floured surface, put it down. Every time you sort of backwards and forwards with the rolling pin evenly, give it a little bit of a turn, sort of clockwise, anti-clockwise, doesn't matter. And when you need to, a little bit more flour underneath. And what this helps, it helps you achieve a nice round piece of pastry. Now, you know I was saying earlier about, it can be difficult to roll out if it's a bit dry. Well, there you can see there, I could have put maybe another teaspoon or so of water into that, but it's manageable. We're getting there. And I've got roughly a circle. Now, this is my tart case. It's quite deep. So what you need to do is you need to make sure you've got plenty of overlap, because it's not just going to go up the sides. I want to go over the top and overlap it so that it will become obvious later on. But just taking a little trimming off any bits that aren't particularly rounded, and those trimmings may or may not come in handy later, so do not throw away any trimmings when you're doing this. So very delicately now, pick it up on the rolling pin. You have to sort of get your eye in, drape it over, and be incredibly delicate now when you're doing this, because the pastry is quite short. It wants to tear and break, as you can see. So just sort of letting it ease itself into, I call it the corners, but you know what I mean. It's round, but there is an edge where the vertical meets the horizontal, and you want to make sure you've got this completely pushed right into that corner. Otherwise, when this bakes, that part will tear, because the butter boils. It will tear and you'll end up with a hole. Now, if you're making a tart with a sort of a more solid filling, you can maybe get away with holes. But when you're making a quiche, something with a wet custard, no. You must have no holes whatsoever. So, and this is, it's a few millimetres thick, maybe a quarter of an inch, something like 4 or 5 millimetres. I don't know if I've got those measurements right, but not super thin, because it needs to be quite sturdy. And this is just getting rid of some of the extra overlap. But when you see people cut it off directly from the top, you'll end up with shrinkage. That pastry will fall down and you won't have a quiche, the pastry, right to the top of your case. So there's extra trimmings. Keep all those. I'm wrapping those up in a bit of cling film and saving them. If I do get any holes, I can use that to patch them up. That, guess where it's going? Back in the fridge for a little while. So let's cook off the filling items. So in with the onions into a heated pan, a little bit of olive oil, bit of salt. Give that a minute or two, medium heat. Got a little bit golden there, so I thought, okay, let's quickly get the broccoli in, and I'm just going to add a little bit of water and stick a lid on that. And I did at some stage have to add a splash more water. Make sure it's steaming. If the steam's escaping, add a little bit more water, but keep that lid on it as much as possible. And you see that's a few minutes, and that's cooked beautifully, that broccoli. In with the spinach, the washed spinach, and again, there's water with that because it's been soaking. And I get the lid and let that spinach wilt down. That's going to take about 1 to 2 minutes to cook that spinach. So quiche, everyone knows, it's French. It's from the Lorraine region, hence why there's this famous dish called quiche Lorraine. And that quiche Lorraine does obviously come from that region, which is next to Alsace. So that sort of region in France stroke Germany, where they've swapped it a couple of times, I think, haven't they? But everyone thinks that's the original version of this. Now, my research has found that actually it is more German, from Lothringen, a dish called Kuchen, which translates roughly to cake. But they use bread instead of pastry. So there you go. France and Germany, not that they squabble very often, but nothing ever bad comes from it, does it ever, lads? Oh, God. Anyway, so a couple of minutes of that. Vegetables, it's ready. And I thought I wanted it to cool down in the fridge, so I should transfer that onto a plate. So get rid of that bowl, spread that out a bit, pop that in the fridge. Time to dock the pastry. So with a fork, just make little holes in there. What that does, I'm not pressing really hard, it just helps to let some steam escape, so the bottom of this pastry, while it blind bakes, this is blind baking, ladies and gentlemen, will stay hopefully in a nice shape. So I use some crinkled up baking parchment, get that in there. I add my baking beans, but you can use some dried rice or dried beans. Heston Blumenthal uses money, but he's got money to burn, any coins obviously, not notes. and that goes in the oven, 150. See, well, I put the temperature on the screen. So time to grate the cheese. So I've grated the hard cheeses, and I thought I'd dice up the blue cheese, the gorgonzola that I'm using, into little cubes. I think that'll be very, very nice. And that's going in the fridge. Alright, so 25 minutes of blind baking. How's this pastry looking? Okay, the outside's looking cooked, but that bit on the inside, not quite there. So this is where we lose the bacon beans. Thank you, bacon beans. You've helped very much. I like to, when I do custard type flans or tarts, egg wash the pastry, and that will seal any little holes that you may have. And there you go. Oh, there's the fork test. Chef John will be proud. That's Chef John from Food Wishes, little channel. He's not doing very well. He needs a bit of help. And now we're time to arrange my filling ingredients. So while I'm doing that, that's a little bit of controversy on the history of the quiche. So it looks like the English move into first place because we have records of tarts made with pastry filled with cream and eggs going back to the 14th century. So stick that in your pipe, French. But then also, last minute coming in Italy, 13th century. Damn. So it looks like the first origins of this dish go to the Italians. Well done. Well done, chaps. Yeah, anyway. You don't come here for the history lesson. We come here for some lovely food. So once I've put my quiche mixture in, the custard mixture, I put half of the grated cheese, and then I thought I'll add in, scatter about nicely, the gorgonzola, and then I put the rest of the grated cheese on top. I think that's rather nice. Oh, it's going to be a winner, this one. So now the oven is lower temperature, 120. I put on the screen there. That's after 25 minutes or so. You can see it's not set. So it took about an hour. But the reason why I do it at low temperature is so that it stays nice and flat. It doesn't souffle. So you end up with a nice mille pond flat quiche. And this is the next day. So you could have cut into that there and then. You could have done what I'm doing here. It would have been a lot more delicate. But you can do it. I prefer to let it get completely cold. So this is the next day. Or, maybe a minimum of like 4 or 5 hours in the fridge to completely set. And then it should come nicely out of the mould, and this bottom should come off nice and easily. Now it hasn't actually. I had to use a knife. So somewhere along the way, something got through. And obviously only a little bit, but there you see. That's not great, but it hasn't affected the dish. The dish is fine, so we're great. Portioning it is much easier when it's cold, so let's just take out a nice little wedge, shall we? How is it looking? Drum roll. Oh, it looks great. So I'm going to bung that in a hot oven, hot oven, for about 10 minutes or so. Time for me to arrange a platter with some pickles and salad on it, and look at that beauty. Anyway, back to me now. Right then, there it is. There's the cold one. Look nice. Quiche. I don't care if it's not very manly. It's delicious. Real men don't eat quiche. Well, this one does. So, this is my spinach, broccoli, and mixed cheese quiche. And when I made it, I was a little bit concerned because I put quite a lot of moist, wet ingredients in there. Not obviously the custard was set, but there's the broccoli and the spinach and stuff. So I was a little bit worried that it might be a bit loose and want to fall over when I reheated it. But look at it. It's held its shape. Does look rather nice. I'm just going to get in there. Now, the pastry is crisp. Oh my god. Okay, you got to make some quiche. It's so nice. Now, let's have a little bit at the end. We've got a bit more pastry. And you can see if I show you, look, see? And let's have a little bit of this tapenade on there. So I know it's no longer the summer here in the UK or in the Northern Hemisphere, but that's sort of my last hurrah to, it was really, apart from obviously the zombie apocalypse, it was really rather a nice summer. Sip a lovely crispy white wine and a Chenin Blanc, I believe that was, and I'll leave you there. This is absolutely delicious. make some quiche. See you soon. Bye.